Hi, welcome to the first live stream for 2024. Don't you always have fun in the first part of the year to see if you can remember the number of the year and make sure you don't get caught out writing 2023. Anyway, happy Australia month. As I said when celebrating Australia's birthday, which is the 1st of January, Federation Day, that's when we were formed in 1901. As I said in celebrating Federation Day, our birthday, this is Australia month because we also have Australia Day coming up on the 26th, when we celebrate the unification of our nation, the formation of our nation. So the purpose of these forums, these live streams, is not just to get a lecture from me. I don't like that. What I'd like to do is to make sure that we can have a chat, challenging me with comments. And it's difficult with the spaces that are limited in the size of the comment area and the time required to type it. But I'd like to have a chat with people who've got issues to discuss. Other times there'll be an update from me to you. There'll be opportunities for holding me accountable. Some people already do, which is wonderful. That's what politicians should be facing all the time, being held accountable. And it's also for making points. So on your points, not just asking my opinions. You know, I get so frustrated going around the country because people say, "What's your opinion on this?" and "What's your opinion on that?" and what do you think about this? The problem with the country is largely political. It's the politicians that have wrecked this country that are wrecking it. And we've got to try and change that around. And people are at the top of our Constitution. And I mean that sincerely. I've said it so many times in the Senate, outside the Senate, public forums, large-scale addresses, that it's the people who are in charge of this country. We're just not doing our job as the people. So the police don't know at all. In fact, they know very little. So it's an opportunity for you to make points, not just ask my opinion. And I mean that sincerely. Today we have a number of positives to cover. But first, I want to remind people that so many people are feeling it pretty tough right now because there are 4 key points that are driving people's anguish at the moment. Mortgages and rents. Huge increases in mortgage payments due to the interest rate, this very steep and sudden interest rate rises. And of course the rents due to immigration and the shortage of rental properties. Secondly, power bills, all artificially increased because the government has put its faith in stupidly in power and solar and wind. Thirdly, grocery prices are increasing at an alarming rate, putting a lot of pressure on people's disposable income. And then crime. We've been talking about that, and it's a state issue, but we've been trying to put pressure on formerly the Palaszczuk government, and now what's his name? Who's in charge of this country, this state again? What's that nobody's name? Miles, isn't it? Something like that. Stephen Miles, that's right. Cheeky bugger. They've been doing nothing. They even said just a few months ago that they had no solutions for youth crime. And it's not just youths who are committing crimes, but it's youths in particular who are doing some pretty brazen things. I'm going to make arrangements for getting Pat Mesiti on to a live stream with me in the near future because Pat was held up at knife point, or rather his wife was held up at knife point last week in the Gold Coast at their home. These youths invaded at 4:30 a.m., just stole his car, wielding a machete. So actually, that's right, his wife wasn't held up, but she was in the backyard with the dog, just coming back from a walk or preparing for a walk. And if she'd walked into the house, she would have been confronted by a machete. Imagine Pat Mesiti waking up knowing that was going on, and he was asleep in bed, as he should be at that time of day on a weekend, and someone was in his house with a machete and another person wielding a knife. And these people are so brazen, and what Pat's done is what most citizens should do. So we'll talk about that. What he's doing in holding the opposition leader accountable, the Minister for Youth Justice and the Labor government accountable. And for those who want the details, we'll have him on in next week or the week after. And go to Facebook, Pasquale Mesiti, Pasquale Mesiti, Pasquale Mesiti. So we'll continue putting pressure as federal politicians on the Miles Palaszczuk government, but we need citizens to be aware and to also put pressure on. And then there's Jim Chalmers, of course. He's celebrating because inflation is not rising as much as it was rising. So it's still rising and putting pressure on. Happy birthday, Tracy Belhenson in Boona. Wonderful lady, very much involved as a citizen with democracy at the federal level in particular, and also state level and local level. Greg Christensen is her mayor in Boona, in Scenic Rim. But Tracy, happy birthday. And whenever I start a meeting, I like to start with appreciation. And so I'm going to start adopting that habit in these live streams. So just think about something you appreciate. I mean, Jesus talked about the need for gratitude. It's really very, very important. It changes literally the heart, which is the only organ in the body that can change the mind. The only organ that can change the mind and has control over the brain. It's not the brain that rules the body, it's the heart. When we're in touch, sometimes we get hijacked and then we flip out, but that's the brain doing that. So to get back into our heart, just some appreciation. So I want to say, first of all, starting the year, something unusual, because politicians in this country, unlike America, are told to downplay their staff, never mention their staff. Well, I'm going to do the reverse. I occasionally use our staff to help me in addressing details, because some of my staff know the details far better on some topics than I do, so I get them involved. And the benefits are to the people in the audience. But I want to express my appreciation to our office team, our staff team. They're a wonderful group of characters. They take on a lot. They're involved. They take ownership of issues. They're allowed to run their own race, and they respond accordingly with a lot of accountability and a lot of creativity. That's the secret to our office. It's the staff team, not the senator with the mouth. It's the staff team behind the senator. So it requires both, doesn't it? So thank you very much to our staff. I also want to appreciate a little dynamo. She's actually shorter than I am, so it was wonderful getting a photo next to Efrat Fenixson, who's an Israeli woman. She's doing podcasts around the world, making a name for herself. Wonderful, wonderful woman. She got into media because she got tired of the mouthpiece media telling lies, and so she's thought, to hell with it, I'll go and do the media myself. So she's doing podcasts with people around the world, all over Eastern Europe, America, Britain. A real dynamo. She understands who's running the world, trying to run the world, globalists. She's exposing them. So we had a wonderful chat. We were originally booked for an hour in the podcast studio here in Bowen Hills, and it ended up 2 hours later 2 hours and 10 minutes later that we called an end to it. So we talked about climate, COVID, money, governance, the globalists, etc. It was a wonderful experience. She's a dynamo to be with. So she'll be doing the editing because I had 3 cameras, 2 microphones between us. So that'll take some time to edit. So once it comes out, we'll post it. I also want to appreciate my staff who've come up with a flyer, a little brochure, if you like, on Maurice Strong. Now, some people won't know who Maurice Strong is. I'll explain that. We're just doing the proof at the moment, so I've got to check it. And we've also got an article that was written by our staff team on Maurice Strong, so that the flyer is a quick introduction, and it is excellent. It is excellent already, so I've still got to read through it in detail. But any more details are presented in the article, and they've done a phenomenal job. Who's Maurice Strong, you might say? He's the man who said, the real enemy is humanity itself. So there it is there. Exposing the occult roots of the Club of Rome's climate agenda. Maurice Strong is the fabricator of climate change. It's all bullshit, but he is the fabricator of that bullshit. And he's doing it. He had 2 aims, and he expressed them publicly. One was to put in place an unelected socialist global governance, and the other one was to deindustrialize Western civilization. So all the things you see, scrap them, go back to the caves. This is the sentiment, this is the aim of climate change, net zero. This is the aim of all of the Club of Rome, the United Nations, the World Economic Forum. That's their aim. Maurice Strong is dead now, but we're going to expose exactly where he started. And I've known this for some time. My staff kept saying, who is this Maurice Strong? So they went and did their own research and have come up with a fabulous document that we will be sharing with you, posting on social media, putting out as flyers, writing articles about. But the point I'm celebrating there and appreciating is the initiative of my staff team to go out and do the work on that. I also want to celebrate a mouthpiece media journalist and appreciate Adam Crichton from News Corporation. We have put posts out, 5 posts, one each day for the last 5 days, taking snippets out of his article, December 19th article on Texas, state of Texas in America suing Pfizer. Yes, suing Pfizer, taking them to court. And, you know, I've done it once before, and it was a bit of a flop when I took an article that was so good, and I posted a portion on it. The next day I posted another portion. The next day I posted another portion. This time I did it with Adam Crichton, and every one of them was fantastically received, really well received, and appreciated. Very strong comments. You know, it's a bit of a challenge to adapt Adam's article because it was so strong, but I thought, okay, I'll try and adapt it. And I found myself going through, I was going to take snippets here and there and take quotes, and I ended up just copying and pasting the whole bloody article over 5 days. It is every paragraph is worth reading. It's on my Facebook page. I want to celebrate a few things as well. The success on gender dysphoria, and it's come sooner than I thought. The Society or Association for Psychiatrists or Psychologists, I can't remember the exact title, for Australia and New Zealand has come out saying that affirmation is the wrong treatment for gender dysphoria. They're saying there needs to be consultation, there needs to be counselling, there needs to be discussion, and not just turning to scalpels to lop bits of teenage bodies off, or drug treatments, hormonal treatments. And that's come about because a small number of us in the Senate have been speaking out about the use of affirmation and the automatic changing of gender. Actually, as everyone knows, you cannot change gender. You can change how people present themselves, but you cannot change gender. It's impossible. And what we've seen lately is the Greens falling silent in the Senate. They used to come out and scream and rant and rave, and last time when we debated this, we had 5 or 6 senators taking the position opposing, which is my position. We were backing up Senator Alex Antic, who introduced a bill to prohibit the spending of federal money on surgery or chemical treatment of people under the age of 18. And Nick McKim did his usual ranting and raving and quite frankly, disgusting lunacy in his speeches. But he was the only Greens that spoke. Normally they all get up and accuse us of causing teens to suicide. And causing teens to suicide, the figures show that it's the teens who are suiciding, not the ones who are prevented from having this surgery, but the ones who have the surgery thinking and being told that they can change back if they don't like it, and then they find out they can't. That's the sad news about that. But the good news is that the psychiatrists and psychologists have at last plucked up the strength to say that affirmation is wrong, and that's not the treatment. And it's another example of how the globalists are coming unstuck. They've overplayed their hand with COVID, United Nations, World Health Organization. There's another thing to celebrate. Their pandemic treaty, pandemic accord, whatever the latest term is, and the international health regulations are being wound right back to almost back to where they were in 2005. And one of my staff has been right on top of that and led the way pretty much globally on the research. We've been leading the way on that, exposing what they were doing. They copped a real flogging from the African nations who told them what they could do with their draft pandemic treaty and their international health regulations. And a lot of countries have followed our lead and exposed the UN World Health Organization. But we still got to keep the pressure up. Still got to keep the pressure up on our politicians. So we'll keep the pressure up on the United Nations World Health Organization, but we'll also keep the pressure up on our politicians, because regardless of what the UN does, our politicians are, if the UN recommends something, it's the politicians in this country who decide whether or not it goes into law. The globalists have been pushing this gender change nonsense and doing it to destroy the family. So, the way to treat children who are going through dysphoria, gender dysphoria, confusion, it's quite natural for many people, especially under stress, is to treat people with love, compassion and support, not bloody scalpels and drugs. Remember, we cannot change gender. No matter how much one wants to, cannot change gender. The Greens on climate are also falling silent in the Senate on climate. So when we debate something on climate, the Greens are now retreating and being very, very meek and demure. They're still telling lies, way out, far-fetched lies in public and in media releases and getting headlines for it. But we've got them retreating in many ways in the Senate. We've still got a long way before people wake up to that, though. Climate fraud, that is. We've also got to celebrate the fact that the COVID terms of reference for a Royal Commission inquiry is about to start. The submissions closed today, January 12th. It was October 23rd when it was my motion in the Senate to refer the task of developing draft terms of reference for a possible future Royal Commission. And that showed that the mood is changing on COVID. The public are saying, when Anthony Albanese, before he was elected Prime Minister and as election campaign, he said he promised a Royal Commission or something similar. And he came out recently, late last year, with a rubbish exercise, a whitewash. And everyone could see it as a whitewash. It was just to let the premiers off the hook. Well, that didn't cut it, and that changed people's attitudes right around the country. They were disgusted with Anthony Albanese and the Labor Party. And people know that Senator Katie Gallagher, who's the finance minister for the Labor government and who is the manager of government business in the Senate, so that she's pretty senior. Only Penny Wong is senior to Katie Gallagher in the Senate. Katie Gallagher carries a lot of weight in the cabinet itself. So when she says we need a Royal Commission, when she was chair of the committee before they came into government, that we need a Royal Commission, and now it's rejected. So people are absolutely stunned that Anthony Albanese could get it so wrong. So that they weren't game to oppose my motion because they know I would have got a photo, a screenshot of the division, which would have showed Labor, Greens, and probably David Pocock, as usual, voting with the Labor Party to oppose exposing the COVID mismanagement. But anyway, it's there, it's gone to committee. So the important thing, this is not a Royal Commission. It's to draft terms of reference for a Royal Commission. It's to put pressure on the government to get a Royal Commission. It's to flag the fact that people's moods are changing, and it's to give people an opportunity to make their submission. And there's two ways you can do it. Thanks to an amazing submission by former barrister Julian Gillespie, who's put so much work into an incredible submission that is going in today. It's going in at the last minute, and I'll explain why it's going in at the last minute. Peter Pham, another lawyer, human rights lawyer, who's been working very, very hard with Julian. Dr. Ian Brighthope, who's a wonderful physician, a Western-trained doctor, but also looking after integrative medicine, Western and natural medicine. He's got a marvelous success rate, very strong man, and a group of other people. And what they've done, they've worked solidly for months now to put this submission together, and they've then offered other people and other groups the opportunity to be co-signers of it, co-signatories. and the Australian Medical Professionals Society led the way in adopting their invitation, and they've become co-signatories. And so they've now got 45,000 people who have signed on as co-signatories. So if you want to be a co-signatory, Google this. AMPS, AMPS, COVID-19 Terms of Reference Co-Signature. And you get to the AMPS page, and there you can put in the signature. And although they'll be submitting this by 5 o'clock in Canberra time for making the deadline for the submission of submissions, they will continue the signatory space open so that as many people as possible can sign it. The idea is to put a lot of weight behind the submission to the Terms of Reference inquiry. And by the way, the Terms of Reference, even though it's not a Royal Commission, it is developing the Terms of Reference. As part of that, we need to understand what the COVID response was about. So that means you have an opportunity to also make a submission in terms of your lived experience of the COVID mismanagement, the 3 years of it. You can tell us about your personal lived experience as an employee, as a parent, as a member of a community, as someone who is injured by the COVID injections, as an employer, small business, medium-sized business, as a public servant in the federal sphere, as a public servant at the state level. You can make a submission. You can make it as short as you want. Just half a page will do. What you think about what happened. Tell us your experience and how it affected you and your family and your employees and your employer, and make a submission. And the usual practice in the Senate inquiries is that the submission can come in after the closing date for submissions. So if you can't get it in today, put it in next week. And you don't have to spend a lot of time. Just give us the facts, give us your lived experience, what you actually experienced, how you were affected, what affected you. Just put it in there. Simpler the better. And remember, if you want to be a co-signer with Julian, Ian, Peter, and the others who wrote this fabulous submission, I mean, it is stunning what they have done. So just Google AMPS, AMPS, COVID-19 Terms of Reference, co-signature, and you'll end up in their landing page. You'll end up at AMPS website. I also want to celebrate Gina Court, who is our candidate up in Cairns for the state election. She is a dynamo. She's a real estate agent up there, has a real estate business, and she has been horrified at the very poor response from the state government in regard to looking after people who were flooded. There's a wonderful little community called Bloomfield on the Bloomfield River. It was decimated. She said the water was 20 meters deep in some parts of that town, 20 meters deep. And what she's been doing for some time now is every day driving from Cairns, taking food, taking tools to the people at Bloomfield. And because the direct access is cut, she's had to drive 4.5 hours each way every day. So I'll tell you more about that later. But not one state official or disaster service has visited Bloomfield. No one from any agency, not one person. So these people at Bloomfield have been left on their own. So thank you very much, Gina. So that raises the fact that I'll be keeping my promise to the people of the Atherton Tableland and Far North Queensland to return, and I'll go through the itinerary. So they've got serious problems up there with rainforests, private property, pristine land, pristine forests being decimated by rainforest and actual toxins coming out of the soil, not treated properly. Cyanide, for example, cyanide. So we'll be going, and we've decided to go up earlier now so that we can actually go to Bloomfield and go to Rossville and other places that were decimated by the floods in Cape York. So on Friday we'll be driving to from Cairns to Bloomfield via Rossville and the Lions Den pub. Many people would know the Lions Den pub. It's been gutted. We listen to people at Bloomfield. We'll then come back and listen to people at Holloway's Beach the next day, just north of Cairns. Then we'll have a meet and greet at the Rattle and Hum Bar and Grill, which is on the Esplanade in Cairns. That'll be 5 o'clock on Saturday. You can register for these things, the forums. So first meet and greet is at the Rattle and Hum Bar and Grill, the Esplanade, Cairns, 65 to 67, the Esplanade. Next day in Innisfail, that's Sunday the 21st, we'll be going to Innisfail to have another meet and greet at the Crown Hotel, 25 Ernest Street, Innisfail. That night we go to where my mother spent most of her early life as a child and as a young adult, Tully. The meet and greet there will be at 5:30 p.m. at the Hotel Tully at 5 Butler Street, Tully. So if you're from Tully or Babinda, then come along. Next morning, early in the morning, we'll be going to, one of my staff and I will be going to the Coombalumba Hydro Project, which was shelved. And we think we want to get the information to restart that. It's a wonderful resource. The dam's already built, the water's impounded, we want to assess it for hydropower. Hydropower is wonderful. It's very, very cheap, and a lot of the infrastructure is already built. And then they shelved it. I wonder why. Then at 8 o'clock on the next day, which is Tuesday, we'll meet with the Chilumban group. And then we'll go on to Ravenshoe, where we were last year as well. And we'll have a forum at 11:30 a.m. in Ravenshoe Hotel. And then that night, Tuesday night, the 23rd, at 6 p.m., we'll have a meet and greet at Atherton, at the Atherton Hotel, 90 Main Street, Atherton. And then the next morning, we'll be doing a walk around through Atherton and mixing with and listening to local businesses. So that's what's happening next week, and then flying back for Australia Day back in Brisbane. So that's the itinerary. The main aims are to listen to people as always. Secondly, to learn in particular about the wind turbines and get an update from the locals who are being gutted by these wind turbine projects, really affecting their land, the natural forests, native forests, the rainforests, the Coombalumba Hydro. As I started, this is Australia Month. Australia Month, the whole month. It started with Federation Day, our birthday, on the 1st of January. Then it's moving to Australia Day on the 26th of January. And like it says, I love Australia Day. Leave it as it is. Get your hands off it. And we need to celebrate the unity of our nation. We had 6 colonies that came together to form a wonderful nation, and we need to make sure that we look after our nation. Okay, we've talked about what's breaking up our nation before many times, and that is the globalists. Davos, the Davos Talk Fest, the Davos exposure of the globalists is going to be, the Davos Festival for the World Economic Forum is going to be starting in just a few days, I understand. I don't know the exact date. And they're up to their usual tricks. They're saying we need to have a finance shock to get people scared and to run and form a global government, unofficial global governance. That's what they're saying in an article. I've got one here. I've got to read it yet. Globalists suggest finance shock and climate controls to launch their Great Reset. That's how these bastards do it. They fabricate fearful consequences. They fabricate fearful events, and then they have shocks. So globalists are suggesting a finance shock and climate controls to launch their Great Reset. It's all rubbish. It's all lies. Unfortunately, we can see now ESG, which has become a byword in corporate Australia and corporate America, environment, social, and governance. This is a headline from the Australian newspaper on the 11th of January, just yesterday. ESG becomes a dirty word in corporate world. So even BlackRock has started to denounce ESG, because ESG is killing the performance of companies. It's killing the performance of companies. And so what they do is they create systems to drive behaviors in certain ways so that they focus companies not on their bottom line, not on returns to shareholders, not on proper investment, not on ethical business, but on environment, social, and governance aspects. And they're a natural part of business. You don't have to focus the whole business on that. You just have to make sure look after those things. So the tide is changing there. And last year, if you remember, at Davos, they they made such a fool of themselves. The World Economic Forum. Al Gore made a fool of themselves. What is it now? Global boiling. Global boiling is coming, and people just laughed at it. John Kerry, the former Secretary of State of the United States, he was raving on too about global warming and about which is false. There's nothing unusual happening in any aspect of climate. Nothing at all. The data shows there's no change. And he was raving on about it as well, and raving on about taking of property rights, agriculture. Then we have Bill Gates, who's the largest landholder of farmland in the United States, wanting to set up lab meat and other foul things, toxins that are not food at all, not real food at all. So these people are wanting to create finance shocks, create climate shocks, climate lies, food shocks. Drive up the cost of living. And of course, what we'll be doing in North Queensland is seeing yet again how these mongrels are killing the environment in the name of saving the environment, decimating the environment in the name of killing the environment. And we see it in the south, in the Murray-Darling Basin, destroying the Murray River, destroying the Murrumbidgee River, destroying various other rivers in northern Victoria, just to appease the globalists, and they're doing enormous environmental damage. So that's what we'll continue to do. So we hope you all will support the Aussie media, the journalists who attend Davos, and report back, because these are no softies in the media. That they're in the new People's Independent media. People like, I'm guessing, Avi Yemeni will be going, Rukshan will be going. They've got their mates from Canada going too, Ezra Levant and others. I hope they're going this year. Because, we need to have a vision for our country. And mine is to restore our country, just to restore our country, get it back in control of the people. We've got to reclaim our power. Restore our country, because at one time our country was, about 120 years ago, our country was leading the world in terms of income per person. Leading the world. Number one in the world. And our resources are second to none. We have more per person than anyone else, but we're not performing at that level at the moment. So what we need to do, we the people need to reclaim our power. We need to reclaim our moral power. We need to have politicians telling the truth. We need to have decisions based on data. That's not the case at the moment. Quite often decisions in Parliament, laws in Parliament, policies in both the major uni parties are contrary to the data, contrary to fact, contrary to truth. So we have to reclaim the moral power, and that means citizens putting pressure on politicians to come clean and to do their job, to do their research and get the data. People have to realize that we have the numbers power. The people have the vote. They are the last say in who is going to form government. And we've got to stop voting for uni party. Labor and Liberal together form a uni party. Their policies are almost identical. We're going to put together a timeline in the near future showing exactly that. When you go through it, as I have over the last 15 years, I've been stunned to see just how much Labor and Liberal have done. For example, climate and energy policies. Every single one of those policies was introduced by the Liberal National Party government. And then when the Labor Party government came in, ramped it up. Every single one of them. The safeguard policy was not introduced by Chris Bowen. It was ramped up by Chris Bowen in September of 2022 when they just recently came into power. It was initially introduced by Malcolm Turnbull as Prime Minister and Greg Hunt as Environment Minister and Climate Change Minister. Every single thing, Paris Agreement, the net zero, the Kyoto Protocol compliance, all introduced by the Liberal Nationals and then ramped up by the Labor Party. Renewable energy target, national electricity market, all introduced by the Liberal Nationals, who pretend to be opposing them. But they've done every single initiative. So we need to reclaim our numbers power, which is the people have the vote. We need to reclaim our numbers power because we, the people, decide which media we buy, where we send our money. So we can either endorse the globalist media, the mouthpiece media, the big brother media, or we can consume private, independent new people's media. It's up to us as consumers. We have that choice. And we also have a voice. We need to spread word about the way the Uni Party, the Liberal Labor parties, are working in this country and have been destroying it for the last 70 years, since the formation of the United Nations, accelerated since the formation of the World Economic Forum, which used the Liberal Labor duopoly, the Uni Party, to do their work for them, to implement United Nations World Economic Forum policies. It's quite clear. The Greens are definitely part of the Uni Party. I see what you're saying. The Greens are definitely part of it. The Greens are the intermediate step. The Greens are the ones who introduce, I've said this many times in the Senate, the Greens are the ones who introduce UN policies, World Economic Forum policies, and into the politics in this country. They get the media behind it, and then they drive the Labor Party, the gutless Labor Party, to abandon the workers and to put in place these UN policies that are pushed in here through the Greens. And then the Liberals are afraid of being left out, so they adopt the Labor Party policies, which are the Greens policies, which came from the United Nations and World Economic Forum. Thank you, Icy's nothing. That's exactly what's going on. The Greens are part of the Uni Party. So we have to use our voices. We have to spread the word, share it with our relatives, share it with our family, share it with our friends, our fellow people on sports teams, working colleagues. We have to share that knowledge around. We have to get our country back, restore our country for humans to abound and flourish. We also have the constitution power. We are at the peak of our democracy. Democracies only work with people being involved. That's why our democracy has abandoned us in this country effectively, because the politicians are in charge. The people are not doing our job as citizens. I celebrated the birthday at the start of this live stream of Tracy Bell Hilton. She has done so much to hold politicians accountable, to spread the word of what we need to do and what is happening in our communities, in our country. The peak of democracy, the peak of our constitution, which is the only constitution in the world that the people voted for. It's a people's constitution. The peak of the constitution, the peak of our democracy is the individual citizen, the individual voter. And the democracy is not just about voting, and not just about voting with intent to be informed, but voting with involvement, working through the community with involvement, holding members of parliament accountable. That's fundamental. If you don't have that, you have a distorted government, you have a tyrannical government. And that's what we've got in this country, that ignores the people. So you can always tell what sort of government you have. When the people are afraid of the government, you've got a tyrannical government. When government is afraid of the people, you've got a democracy. And I can tell you now that the Labor Party and Liberal Party are not afraid of the people in this country. Neither are the bureaucrats. And then we've got one more, we need to restore that. Then we've got one more power, which is the universal power, the human spirit. And for those who believe in it, the universal spirit, God, that's the ultimate spirit that we can tap into, the ultimate power. That's there, that works. So our vision again is to restore our country for humans to abound and flourish. Right throughout history, when humans are free, their country responds dramatically and you have human progress. We spent a few hours a couple of days ago just refreshing things for the new year, and I'll go through a list of topics on the board behind me that our staff developed with me on Tuesday. Now, it all ties back ultimately to driving for cheaper mortgages and rents and power bills and groceries. I've already said that. So the 6 main topics are the hip pocket, proper economic policy, proper energy policies, restore Australia to the position of having the cheapest power prices in the world, which we had just a couple of decades ago. Second is COVID. The lived experience of people. How many died? How many lost their jobs? How many have an ongoing health issue right now? Some are severely crippled for life. I know 2 people who are quadriplegics, and the doctors have no clue what to do about it. And that came from, and they're diagnosed as due to the COVID injections. the economic devastation of the lockdowns and the injections and the mandates, the family disharmony, the educational loss, the mental health problems, the suicide, the social cohesion loss, the erosion of trust. The erosion of trust in our governments, state and federal, and the erosion of trust in our health systems and our doctors, many of our doctors and our hospitals. Fertility rates plummeting, deaths and life expectancy going backwards. America suffered a 2-year decrease in life expectancy. Every year for many, many decades, life expectancy has been increasing. In the last 2 years, the decline has been 2 years, I think, one of the years, and maybe 1 year and another year. Decline in life expectancy. Another is to restore one community. It's being split by things like gender dysphoria, race, false claims about race, nationalism. We need to restore nationalism, pride in our country. 15-minute cities. That's already on the agenda in this country. We need to prevent that. Using religion, fighting people on attacking Christians, protecting some other religions, Muslims in particular being protected. They didn't have to endure some of the things that Christians had to endure during the lockdowns, for example. That causes division. If it's good for one, it's good for the other. Immigration, excessive immigration, wrong sort of people coming into the country, not meeting the standards that we want, which is compliance with values, compliance with our laws, and compliance with our culture. Doesn't mean you have to leave the rest your former culture behind. If you're from Britain, if you're from Italy, if you're from Yugoslavia, if you're from India, you can still bring aspects of your culture. You can still bring your background. But we want people to comply with our laws, comply with their values, and fit into Australia's culture. Many immigrants do. We just want to make sure that all do. Family has been destroyed. We want to restore Christian values for families, have a cohesive culture. And the fundamental driver of humans is the dream of legacy, leaving something behind for the planet, leaving something behind for your future generations that you've sired, leaving something behind in terms of generational wealth, but also in terms of a legacy of happy grandchildren and children who can have something to aspire to. We've also got to restore liberty in this country, the right to choose cannabis and hemp if you want it. The wonderful drugs. Cannabis is a wonderful drug. Hemp is a wonderful product. Both have been gutted. I won't go into it. Both have been gutted because of the globalists wanting to establish monopolies in pharmaceuticals, in textiles, in paper, and in food. They've destroyed a wonderful product in cannabis and hemp. Water rights, freedom of speech, property rights. Property rights are being decimated. People don't realize it. Property rights are being decimated in suburban areas as well. So these are the things that we want to fix. I've already mentioned Maurice Strong from the United Nations, the man who fabricated global warming. Maurice Strong is up there with Chairman Mao for the number of people that died as a result of his policies. When he formed the United Nations Environmental Program, he was made head of that program. This is how bad the United Nations and the World Economic Forum are. As a result of United Nations Environmental Program lies under Maurice Strong, the wonderful insecticide DDT was vilified falsely. The United States Environmental Protection Agency did a study on the environmental and health impacts of DDT and found there was nothing there. The science says there was no problem when it's used properly, none at all. Yet it was banned because of the United Nations. Banned. It went against the data to do it, just like they're going against the data with climate fraud. And as a result, 40 to 50 million people in Africa and India and Ceylon died from DDT. Died from died from malaria, which DDT would have prevented. So Maurice Strong is responsible for 40 to 50 million deaths just so that he could control the agenda. Hitler, 20 million deaths. Stalin, 40 million deaths. That's the number of deaths attributed to these mongrels. Maurice Strong, 40 to 50 million deaths. Chairman Mao from China, 60 million deaths. Maurice Strong is up there amongst the most evil people with an anti-human agenda. So we have to restore governance in this country and restore governance worldwide. And just remember that the Liberal Labor Party are working, the Uni Party, working together for the globalists, pushing through globalist policies. So I'm happy to take questions. If anyone's got any questions, comments, I wanted to catch up. I meant what I said. In future, I would like an open discussion, open exchange, whatever we want to talk about. Any questions? So the federal government thinks our struggle is only caused by retailers. Nothing they've done. Right, Christoph. Yeah, you are right, mate. The federal government blames everyone but itself. It won't take responsibility. Both the Liberal Party and the Labor Party, both of the uni parties, do that. It's a tactic well known in politics. Put your enemies outside you, put your enemies outside the community, unite with the voters, fool the voters. It's a well-known tactic. It's been done for thousands of years throughout history. Many of the big empires, when the Grubs took over, they did exactly that. Just blame someone else, rally the people against that, tell lies, and that's what they do. The government is, I've said it before and I'll say it again. I've said it in the Senate, I've said it publicly, I've said it on live streams. Every major problem in this country is due to the federal government, due to the building we call Parliament House in Canberra. Every major problem. Excuse me. Tracy, immediate halt on immigration until there is no homelessness in Australia. Yes, yes. And you know, I led the charge on that in the last 2 years, because the numbers are staggering. 540,000 new immigrants coming into this country. That is way above double. That's more than double the previous highest in this country on a regular basis. More than double. I went down before Christmas to the banks of the river, and you can do it in the Botanical Gardens, you can do it at South Bank, you can do it at North Quay, you can do it at West End. There are people sleeping in tents, and the council comes along every now and then and paints under a bridge and destroys their tent. These people are homeless. They're destitute. People are sleeping in tents, people sleeping in caravans, people sleeping in cars, in Bundaberg parks, and getting moved on every now and then by the council. People sleeping under bridges. I saw someone sleeping in a bus shelter last night in the middle of Brisbane, in Ann Street. And people sleeping in Gladstone in their showground. This is all due to excessive immigration. We've got 2.3 million people on non-immigrant visas in this country right now, and they're competing with Australians for beds. Everyone needs a roof over their head. It's very, very difficult. We need an immediate halt on immigration. Just get immigration back to zero net immigration, we call it. So if this many people leave every year, we have this many who come in to replace the people who leave. Until we get on top of our infrastructure, our services, get our housing back, until we get on top of those three things, we need to have an immediate halt so that we have zero net immigration. Sarah says, foreigners should not be allowed to purchase property unless Australian citizens. Yes, Pauline's been saying that for almost 3 decades, and we've been saying it for a while now. Oh, and by the way, the previous comment about immigration, the Labor Party is now starting to recognise that there is a problem with housing, but they're not doing anything about it. And this is the problem in this country. We have put up such a fuss about immigration in the Senate, outside the Senate, in social media, that the Labor Party knows the people are pissed off about it. So they pretend to do something. They pretend to do something. And they're making the situation far, far worse. So one of the things that we need to do as part of our housing policy is to stop foreigners buying houses, stop foreigners owning houses. We need to ban. There you go. Adrian's just put up a post. Adrian Cotter put up a comment. Need to ban overseas buyers from residential. Yes. And that's what we've been saying. That's part of One Nation policy on immigration and on housing. It's part of our housing policy. So, yes, I agree with you both. SP says, I've never seen actual politicians speak to people like this on YouTube. Very cool. Well, thank you very much. But I'm not a typical politician. I don't like that term. I don't like being called a politician. But I'm a true politician is what I think, because my job, taxpayers pay me. I serve the taxpayers. I don't just serve the people that voted for me. I serve the constituents of Queensland and the constituents of Australia. I'm a servant to the people of Queensland and Australia. I start my Senate speeches with something like that, or those very words myself. So thank you very much for endorsing what I've been doing. Mo says, I'm seeing families sleeping in cars while Labor are providing hotels for criminal asylum seekers. There's not much I can say more than that. You got that one right. High cost of living equals more crime. Len, you're absolutely correct. You know, it all comes back to basics, doesn't it? When you're gutting the economy and cost of living goes up dramatically, mothers and fathers both have to work. And when you pay for childcare, you've got bugger all left for it. You might have $50, but you're scratching around trying to find that extra $50, so you do it. And people know that the critical years for the formation of both character and intellect, the critical years for the formation of both character and intellect are birth to 6. Children need to be with their parents. Now, one parent has to go out and earn a living. In my generation, one parent stayed home, one parent went out to earn a living. These days, so many have to have double incomes. That means no one is looking after the children. They're being raised by someone in an institution. That means they're being raised by the United Nations and the World Economic Forum, because the policies in those institutions are quite often ultimately from the United Nations and the World Economic Forum. They indoctrinate the children in preschools, they indoctrinate the children in childcare, they indoctrinate the children in primary school, indoctrinate the children in high school, indoctrinate the children in university, and then those teachers that graduate from universities indoctrinate the kids that they teach in school. High cost of living, more crime. High cost of living, more kids don't know which way's up. And when you talk about climate fraud and the world going to end in the next few years, and COVID's going to kill you, and all the rest of it, and how humans are bad, irresponsible, greedy, unkind, uncaring, then young children say, what's to live for? So there's no repercussions. They won't be around for much longer, because the planet's going to be fried. So they might as well commit crime and have a bit of fun. But it's no way to have fun. So you're right, Len. High cost of living, more crime. Yep. Central banks create inflation, says My Steam. My Steam, you are absolutely correct. Ron Paul was a senator in the American Congress, and an absolutely admired senator. Both sides of politics in America, well, they're almost like a uni-party too. Many Republicans are like the bloody Democrats. Both sides of politics spoke openly, pleasingly, very, very strongly in favor of Ron Paul. Ron Paul did his work. He said that the privately owned United States Federal Reserve Bank, privately owned central bank that controls monetary policy, controls interest rates in that country, what it's done is every major recession since 1913 and the formation of the Federal Reserve Bank has been created by the Federal Reserve Bank. What they do, he said repeatedly, is they reduce interest rates, flood the joint with cash. People then get the cheap cash and go overcommit themselves in loans, and then they rapidly ramp up the rates, interest rates, and people default, and then the Reserve Bank comes in and takes their property, forecloses on their property. It's called asset stripping. Asset stripping. And John McRae, who I know very well, speaks a lot on Talkback Radio in Sydney for many decades. He has some fabulous material on the banks that he gave me. I can't remember his quotes. But the banks are tasked with actually asset stripping. So you're right. Central banks flood the joint with cash. And that's exactly what our Reserve Bank did during the COVID mismanagement, during the lockdowns. Flooded the joint with cash. Lockdowns were never necessary. That's why we need your submission for the terms of reference Royal Commission, terms of reference for a Royal Commission, the inquiry to develop those terms of reference. Get your submissions in. co-sign the submission. I need to know so I can inform others that I try to educate about preference voting. Probably not enough time at the moment, Derek. Thank you for the question. It's a really important question. Preferential voting is basically still having a vote that gives your number one preference. That's called a primary vote. That goes out to the candidate that you want most elected. If your first candidate doesn't get enough votes, they get knocked out. When it's first past the post, that's the end of your vote. It's lost. But if you have preferential voting, then the candidate that you want second most, you give them a 2 to. You allocate them a 2. So when your first one gets knocked out, your vote goes to 2. And if 2 gets enough, votes to get more than 50%, your second preferred candidate gets in. In Britain and America, where there's no preferential voting, your vote doesn't count. But preferential voting, here in this country, your vote goes to number 2. Now, if number 2 doesn't have 50%, then your vote will go to your number 3. So in that way, you can make sure that your vote has maximum power. And it also is essential, so I hope that's explained it as quickly as I can. Give your first preference to the one you prefer most. If they don't win, then give your second preference to the one you prefer secondly, then third, fourth, and so on. So then there's also optional, preferential, and compulsory. It varies from state to state and federal. Federal is compulsory preferential voting. So that's another explanation. But we've made lots of videos about this. We'll be doing it again leading up to the next election campaign, Queensland and federal. So that's what happens. Preferential voting looks after you to make sure your vote is maximised. Dale Edie, wow, what a confession. This is exactly what's needed for true accountability. Thank you so much for what you're saying. I'm going to read what Dale has said, because I'm exactly like you are, Dale. Dale's saying, I'm nearly 60. I feel partly responsible for what has happened. I didn't notice over the years. Mate, I didn't notice myself, even though I thought I was fairly politically astute, just how bad the Liberal Labor Party were. I thought John Howard was a fabulous Prime Minister. I recognised after he was, and I wrote him a letter when he got the boot saying, thank you for what you've done. 6 years later, I wrote him another letter. I'm rescinding my first letter because I started doing my research just before he got booted out. And I continued my research, and he introduced the worst policies in energy and climate in this country. His government stole the farmers' rights to use their property as they want, which is a fundamental right. They destroyed the Constitution by going around the Constitution to steal those rights. I won't go into the details now. But the man I thought was a hero led a government that stole farmers' property rights. And then, 6 years later, in London, he said proudly, that on the topic of climate science, I'm agnostic. He didn't have the bloody science, yet he destroyed our country. So Dale, there are many of us who share your responsibility, share your sadness for what we did by not being aware, but now let's look forward and become aware. So I'm going to end now because Derek Motley asked, who is fond giving the preferences to? We don't give preferences because every voter owns their own preferences. They allocate preferences. So I've got 1 minute to close. So remember this, we've talked about some of the things to celebrate and appreciate. We've also talked about how the globalists have been destroying our country. We've had Dale talk about, and myself confess that we were partly responsible. We are partly responsible because we weren't informed. Just remember this, the globalists are stretched. The United Nations World Health Organization is in retreat. The World Economic Forum, Davos, is in retreat. We need to restore our governance based on using data and persisting, always telling the truth. The Greens are starting now to give up their rantings. So what can you do? Share my material. Speak out. Stand your ground, just like I stand my ground in the Senate. Be proud of being Australian. Be proud of being human. Very, very important. They're attacking humanity. As Marie Strong said, the real enemy is humanity itself. Rubbish. Don't use their language. Speak up. Use simple words, common sense, accurate language. Don't call anyone a climate denier. Just call them a skeptic. Thank you very much for listening. And we'll see you hopefully next week, maybe from Bloomfield up in North Queensland. If we can't arrange it, then it'll be then the week after. And we'll have Pat Mesiti on.